The sky was a bruise that day, heavy and gray, the kind that makes your chest ache before you even know why. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd braided Karen's hair, helped Luke with algebra, and served David's birthday cakes. My pink sweater clung to me, the one George used to say brought out my cheeks' color. I'd even put on lipstick, smudging it in the toaster's reflection, wanting to look nice for my children. Foolish, I know, but I still craved their love. The coffee cups sat ready, 4 of them, like we were having a family meeting. I should have known better. The door slammed, too loud for a visit. Karen strode in first, her face tight, the way it got when she was hiding something. David followed, eyes glued to his phone. Luke came last, clutching papers I didn't like the look of. "Mom," Karen began, her voice soft, like she was soothing a child, "we've been talking. That's how it starts, isn't it? When they're about to tear your world apart." She spoke of a wonderful place in the hill country, a resort-style facility with bingo nights and movie screenings. My heart pounded. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, calm as I could manage. "This is my home." Luke cleared his throat, sliding the papers across the table. "Mom, you've been forgetting things. We're trying to protect you." "Protect me? From what? My own life?" I wanted to scream, to hurl those papers back at them. Instead, I stared at my hands, the ones that had packed their lunches, sewn their costumes, held them through fevers. Hands that worked 2 jobs after George died to keep this roof over us. "You signed the power of attorney," Karen said, softer now. My knees buckled. I didn't remember signing, but I'd been tired lately. Days blurred sometimes, I'd misplace keys, forget a bill. Nothing dangerous, just slips. I trusted them. They were my babies. I never thought they'd use it against me. Within an hour, my bags were packed. They didn't let me choose which photos to take, just one suitcase. My house, filled with love, sweat, and heartache, was stripped from me in an afternoon. The ride to Oak Hill Senior Living was silent. David drove, Karen tapped her phone, and Luke sat beside me, avoiding my eyes. "You'll love it, Mom," he muttered. I wanted to laugh or cry. I did neither. The beige complex squatted between a gas station and a dry cleaner, no trees, just pavement. A woman in scrubs greeted me with a clipboard and a smile that tried too hard. That first night, I cried into my pillow, muffling the sound so no one would hear. Not because of the cold sheets or tasteless food, but because my children had stopped seeing me as a person. To them, I was a burden, something to be moved. The room was small, smelling of antiseptic and peppermint gum. A twin bed, a dresser, a closet too narrow for my life. I unpacked with robotic numbness until I opened the dresser's bottom drawer. There, tucked in the corner, was my old leather folio. My hands trembled as I unzipped it. Inside was the deed to my house, still in my name, no signatures from Karen, no notary stamp. I sat on the bed, the papers shaking in my lap. They hadn't just taken me away, they planned to sell my home, probably to flip it for profit. Rage and shame flooded me, but so did something else, clarity. I clutched that deed like it was the last piece of me they hadn't stolen. For the first time since George's funeral, I prayed, not for peace, but for a sign. The next morning, it came. Ruth barreled into the dining hall, her lavender sweater sparkling with rhinestone buttons. "Guess who's back from her son's wedding," she announced, nodding at Maxine, who poured coffee with a scowl. "New wife's a Botox doll. Wouldn't know a book if it hit her lips." We laughed, but I was distracted. After breakfast, I pulled Maxine aside, whispering, "I need your help." In her private room, because Maxine always found a way, we spread the documents across her desk. She tapped her red nails on the deed. "They've got medical control, but the house? Still yours." My heart thudded. "Can they sell it?" She shook her head. "Not if you catch them first." I gritted my teeth. "Then I need to sell it myself." Maxine's eyes widened, then she smiled. "You serious?" "I want to live before I die," I said. And just like that, the spark caught fire. The air in Oak Hill Senior Living was always too warm, like the heat was trying to lull you into forgetting who you were. But that morning, after Maxine's smile lit something in me, I felt a shiver of purpose. The dining hall smelled of instant coffee and overcooked eggs, and the hum of fluorescent lights buzzed like a warning. I sat at our usual table, Ruth dealing cards for poker with a nurse who was losing spectacularly. "You bet your lunch money on that hand, baby," Ruth cackled, slapping down a flush. Her laughter was a lifeline, pulling me from the fog of betrayal. I hadn't slept much. The deed to my house lay hidden in my folio, tucked beneath a stack of old letters from George. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Karen's tight smile, Luke's averted gaze, David's indifference. They thought they'd buried me here, in this beige purgatory where the days blended into a monotony of bingo and bland soup. But they didn't know Eleanor Grace Miller. Not really. Maxine slid into the seat beside me, her coffee black as her mood. "You meant what you said yesterday?" she asked, voice low. I nodded, my fingers tightening around my mug. "I'm selling the house. I'm getting out." Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, studied me. Then she leaned back, a slow grin spreading. "Well, damn. Let's make it happen." We roped in Ruth first. She claimed she'd once dated a real estate agent, probably bald and divorced now, she said with a wink, and swore she could still get his number. Doy joined us later, her soft Vermont accent soothing as she offered to navigate the facility's phone rules. "I used to sneak calls for students," she whispered, eyes twinkling. "This'll be fun." Fun. The word felt foreign, but it stirred something in me, like a memory of who I used to be before life wore me down. The plan took shape in stolen moments, over lukewarm tea in the lounge, during walks in the courtyard where the only green was artificial turf. Maxine made the real calls, her old law contacts still loyal despite the years. She spoke in clipped tones, all business, while Ruth scouted the staff schedules, noting when the nurses were too busy to notice us. Doy set up a Gmail account on the community computer, her fingers slow but steady. "No one suspects old ladies," she said, grinning. "And me?" I played the part of the docile mother, smiling at the nurses, answering Karen's check-in calls with a voice sweet as molasses. "I'm fine, sugar pie," I'd say, while inside, I was plotting my escape. The sale moved fast. My neighborhood, once quiet, was now a hot spot for tech workers and young families. Maxine's contact, Jack Winston, a grumpy lawyer who owed her a favor, handled the listing. Within hours, we had a full-price offer. I didn't meet the buyers, I didn't need to. The transaction was a blur of emails and signatures, all routed through Jack. The money, more than I'd dared hope, landed in a new account Doy helped me set up on the facility's Wi-Fi. Every step felt like waking from a drugged sleep, each click of the keyboard a reclaiming of my life. But the final step was the hardest. We chose a Friday night, when the staff would be distracted by bingo in the rec room. Ruth bribed an aide with a bottle of perfume and a pizza to skip checking my room. I packed light, one suitcase, my passport, the deed, and a few photos of George and the kids from better days. My hand shook as I wrote the note, "Don't look for me. I've gone to find the life you stole." I left it on the pillow, my heart pounding like I was 20 again, sneaking out to meet George behind the bleachers. We slipped out through a side door, the night air sharp with the scent of asphalt and distant mesquite. The Uber waited, its air conditioning broken, the driver silent. Ruth, Doy, Maxine, and I crammed in, our suitcases wedged between us. The terminal lights glowed like a promise. I bit my lip to keep from crying. "Rome," I whispered, the word tasting like freedom. It was our first stop, a place I'd only dreamed of in movies. As the plane took off, Texas shrank below, its lights glittering like tears I refused to shed. Rome smelled of fresh bread and old stone, with a sweetness I couldn't name, maybe joy, maybe revenge. My legs ached from the flight, my first in 20 years, but I couldn't stop smiling. Ruth snored the whole way, her head bobbing like a pigeon. Doy clutched my hand during takeoff, muttering prayers in English and half-remembered Latin. Maxine read a thriller, sipping tomato juice like we were on vacation, not fugitives. We landed in the golden morning, the eternal city sprawling below like a painting come alive. The pension in Trastevere was simple: clean sheets, warm bread, a view of ivy-draped buildings. The clerk didn't blink at four gray-haired women with light luggage. Rome had seen stranger things. That first day, we walked until our feet screamed. Ruth haggled for scarves we didn't need. Joy bought postcards, writing one to her long-dead sweetheart. Maxine flirted with a cafe owner who brought us tiramisu on the house. And I stood before the Colosseum, the wind washing over me. I wasn't a burden or a discarded mother. I was Eleanor Grace Miller, alive. But freedom stirs ghosts. On our third night, I checked my email, a mistake. 10 messages from Karen, the latest screaming, "What have you done?" I didn't open it. I didn't need to hear her panic or fury. The house was gone. The money was gone. So was I. Maxine found me on the terrace, my laptop glowing, my wine untouched. "You okay?" she asked, her knee bumping mine. "I don't feel bad," I whispered, surprised. "I thought I'd feel guilty." She lit a cigarette, ignoring the no-smoking sign. "They chose themselves, Ellie. You just chose you back." Her words settled in me, heavy and true. I wasn't running from them anymore. I was running toward something, toward me. Florence greeted us with a golden haze, the Arno River glinting like a ribbon under the late afternoon sun. The air carried the scent of leather from the market stalls and the faint sweetness of gelato melting in paper cups. Our train from Rome had rattled through hills dotted with cypress trees, and I'd pressed my face to the window, watching the world blur past like a dream I was finally living. Ruth fanned herself with a tourist map, muttering about the heat. Joy sketched the landscape in a small notebook, her pencil scratching softly. Maxine, ever practical, had already booked our rental, a cramped apartment with peeling wallpaper and a view of the Duomo's dome, glowing like a promise against the sky. The city felt alive, its cobblestone streets humming with voices in a dozen languages, the clatter of espresso cups, the chime of church bells. I walked slower than the others, not because my knees ached, though they did, but because I wanted to feel every step. In Rome, I'd tasted freedom; in Florence, I began to understand its weight. The betrayal still lingered, a bruise that throbbed when I let my guard down. My children's faces haunted me, Karen's tight smile, Luke's averted eyes, David's indifference. I'd sold the house, taken the money, and run, but I couldn't outrun the question: how did it come to this? We spent our days wandering. Ruth dragged us to the Uffizi, where she declared Botticelli's Birth of Venus overrated but pretty. Joy lingered in the cathedral, her fingers tracing the cool marble, whispering about the artisans who'd built it centuries ago. Maxine scouted cafes, her sharp eyes catching every detail, from the waiter's smirk to the price of wine. I followed, quieter than usual, my thoughts tangled. At night, we'd gather on our tiny balcony, sipping Chianti and trading stories. Ruth told of her wild youth in Dallas, sneaking into jazz clubs. Joy spoke of Vermont winters, soft and reverent. Maxine shared less, but when she did, it was with a lawyer's precision, each word carrying the weight of a life hard won. On our fourth night, I found the letters. I'd been unpacking my suitcase, searching for a lost sock, when my fingers brushed a manila folder tucked in a side pocket. George's handwriting stared back at me, Ellie, in his neat, slanted script. My breath caught. I sat on the creaky bed, the city's hum fading as I opened it. 6 letters, dated over 5 years before his death. I read them alone, the others out at a late dinner I'd skipped, claiming a headache. George's words were a lifeline and a wound. He wrote of the kids, how he'd noticed their entitlement, their subtle manipulations. Karen's insistence on helping with our finances, Luke's offhand comments about me moving out, even when I was healthy. David's silence, which George said hurt him most. "They're turning on you, Ellie," he wrote in one, dated a year before his heart gave out. "I don't know how to stop it. I'm scared for you." The last letter, written weeks before he died, broke me. "If you're reading this, I hope I was wrong. But if they've hurt you, if you're alone, remember, you're worth more than they've made you believe. Fight back, Ellie. You've always been stronger than me. I clutched that letter, rocking on the bed, tears soaking the paper. He'd seen it coming, even then. The pain of his love, his fear for me, burned. I cried for him, for the promises we'd made, for the babies I'd raised who'd turned into strangers. But I also cried for me, for the woman who'd let herself shrink to fit their expectations. The city pulsed outside, indifferent, and I felt small but not broken. Not anymore. The next morning, I told the others. We sat in a cafe, the air thick with espresso and cinnamon. Ruth spoke first, her voice fierce. Then we raise hell. Maxine leaned in, her eyes glinting. I know a guy with media contacts. We tell your story, all of it. Doi nodded, her soft hands folding mine. You're not alone, Ellie. You could help others. My quiet escape became something bigger, a mission. I wasn't just running, I was fighting. We contacted Jack Winston, Maxine's lawyer friend. He connected us with Megan Luce, a journalist with a syndicated podcast and a following of women hungry for truth. Megan wanted to meet, saying she'd been chasing a story like mine for years. While we waited, we traveled Venice's canals, Nice's azure coast, Lisbon's tiled streets. We danced in bars, laughed until our sides ached, took photos that belonged in a magazine for fierce grandmothers. Each city chipped away at the weight I carried. I wasn't just surviving, I was healing. But the past wasn't done with me. In Portugal, on a beach with the Atlantic licking my ankles, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't know. I answered, expecting a booking confirmation. Instead, a voice I hadn't heard in years, Grandma? My heart stopped. It was Emily, my youngest granddaughter, crying. I found you. Please don't hang up. She knew about the letters, the podcast. She wanted to talk. I promised to call back, my hand shaking so badly Ruth had to take the phone. The surf roared, and I stood frozen, the ground shifting beneath me. Emily had always been different, quiet, watchful, the one who'd trailed me in the garden, asking about birds. She'd sent me drawings, called until Karen cut her off. Now 16, she sounded raw, sincere. But Maxine's warning echoed, don't let a soft voice fool you. Was this a trick? Another betrayal? I didn't know. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fire, I felt George's words, fight back. Whatever came next, I'd face it, not as a victim, but as Eleanor Grace Miller, the woman I was becoming. The Portuguese sun sank into the Atlantic, leaving a trail of amber and violet across the water. The beach stretched wide, its sand cool under my bare feet, the air sharp with salt and the faint tang of seaweed. I stood motionless, the phone still warm in my hand from Emily's call. Her voice, soft, trembling, so much like the little girl who'd once clung to my skirt, echoed in my mind. I found you. Please don't hang up. Ruth, Doi, and Maxine sat on lounge chairs nearby, their silhouettes framed against the fading light. They'd watched me take the call, sensed the shift in me, but gave me space. The surf roared, a steady pulse, and I felt caught between two worlds, the one I was building and the one I'd left behind. I didn't call Emily back that night. My heart wasn't ready. Instead, I joined the others at a seaside tavern, where we ate grilled sardines and drank Vinho Verde under strings of twinkling lights. Ruth regaled us with a story about a disastrous blind date in the 80s, her laughter booming over the clink of glasses. Doi recited a poem she'd written about the ocean, her voice soft as the waves. Maxine, quieter than usual, watched me with those hawk-like eyes. You gonna tell us what that call was about? She finally asked, cutting through the chatter. I took a sip of wine, the glass cool against my lips. It was Emily. My granddaughter. Their faces shifted, Ruth's eyebrows shot up, Doi's hand stilled, Maxine's jaw tightened. I told them everything, Emily's tears, her mention of the letters, the podcast. How she'd said she couldn't stay with Karen after learning the truth. She wants to meet, I finished, my voice barely above a whisper. Maxine leaned back, lighting a cigarette despite the waiter's frown. Could be a setup. Karen's desperate now that the house is gone. Ruth nodded, but Doy squeezed my arm. She sounded sincere, Ellie. Sometimes a child sees what their parents can't. I didn't answer. The possibility of Emily's sincerity felt like a knife, sharp with hope, dangerous with risk. I'd loved her fiercely, saved her crayon drawings, taught her to plant marigolds. But she was Karen's daughter, raised in the shadow of my betrayal. Could I trust her? Could I trust myself not to crumble if she turned out to be another lie? 2 days later, a text came. Just a photo, my old house, stripped bare. The porch was empty, the rose bushes I'd tended with George gone, the sky blue shutters repainted a dull beige. Below it, Emily's words, they trashed it. I'm sorry. My throat closed. They hadn't just sold my home, they'd erased it, gutted every trace of the life I'd built. I showed the photo to the girls. Ruth looked away, her lips tight. Doy's eyes filled with tears. Maxine flicked her cigarette into the wind. Time to go public, she said, her voice steel. We arranged the interview with Megan Luce in Porto, in a quiet cafe overlooking the Douro River. The air smelled of coffee and fresh bread, the tables adorned with blue and white tiles. Megan arrived with a backpack of recording gear, her face bare of makeup, her warmth like a hug. Tell me everything, she said, and I did. I spoke of the sacrifices, double shifts, birthdays made magic with pennies, the nights I'd stayed awake praying for my kids' futures. I told her of the betrayal, the power of attorney I didn't remember signing, the day they took me from my home like furniture that no longer fit. My voice broke when I described the deed, the escape, the women who'd become my family. When I finished, Megan took my hand. You're not alone, Eleanor. This story, it's going to wake people up. The podcast aired a week later. It exploded, hundreds of thousands of downloads, messages flooding in from women across the country. Survivors of elder abuse, daughters who regretted their silence, sons who'd watched their mothers fade. I became a symbol, not by choice, but because I'd survived. Karen sent a furious email, how dare you? Luke called twice, his voicemails dripping with blame. David left a slurred message, half threat, half plea. I deleted them all. But then Emily emailed again. She'd left home, was staying with her father's sister, couldn't face Karen after confronting her. I want to meet, Grandma. Not in Texas. Anywhere. Please. Maxine was skeptical, Ruth hesitant, but Doy's words stayed with me. Sometimes healing means opening a door. I chose Savannah, Georgia, a city of magnolias and ghosts, always on my list. We flew in the next week. Emily waited in Forsyth Park, on a bench under a moss-draped oak. She stood when she saw me, eyes brimming, her face so like Karen's younger self it stole my breath. But there was something else, something raw, searching. Hi, Grandma, she said, her voice small. Hi, sweetheart, I replied, my own voice nearly failing. We walked for hours, the air thick with the scent of blooming jasmine. She asked about George, my childhood, the day they took me. She told me she'd found the letters by accident, looking for her birth certificate in Karen's files. She'd confronted her mother, and Karen had slapped her. I couldn't stay, Emily whispered, her hands twisting. I looked at this girl, half woman, half child, and something in me cracked open. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted restoration, not for them, but for me. That night, I hugged her so tightly I felt her heartbeat against mine. When I returned to the girls, Ruth wiped a tear, Doy smiled, and Maxine said, well, damn. Guess there's hope for one of them. We spent a week in Savannah, Emily joining us for dinners, walks by the river, stories under the stars. It was awkward, then beautiful, like breathing after drowning. One night, she turned to me. What if we started something? A place for women like you, like us? I didn't answer, but the seed was planted. The past was a wound, but the future was a fire waiting to be lit. Savannah's air was thick with the scent of magnolias and river mud, the kind of humidity that clung to your skin like a memory. The city moved slowly, its streets lined with live oaks dripping Spanish moss, their branches weaving a canopy that felt both sheltering and heavy. Our guest house sat on a quiet square, its porch creaking under the weight of wicker chairs and potted ferns. Each morning, I'd sit there with coffee, watching the world wake, horse-drawn carriages clopping by, joggers weaving through the park, the distant hum of a saxophone drifting from some unseen corner. Savannah was a place where ghosts and dreams lived side by side, and I felt both stirring in me. Emily's words from that night, a place for women like you, like us, had taken root, sprouting in the quiet moments between laughter and tears. She'd joined us daily, her presence a bridge between the past I'd fled and the future I was grasping for. At 16, she was fierce yet fragile, her eyes carrying a wisdom no child should have. Over dinners of shrimp and grits, she'd ask questions, about George's laugh, my first job, the roses I'd planted. I'd answer, my voice steady but my heart raw, marveling at how she saw me, not as a burden, but as a person. It was a gift I hadn't known I'd lost. But trust was a fragile thing. Maxine's warning lingered, she's still one of them. Karen's slap, Emily's flight to her aunt's, those were real, but so was the blood tie to my betrayers. I watched her closely, searching for a flicker of deceit. Yet when she laughed at Ruth's body jokes or helped Dory braid her hair, I saw only sincerity. One evening, as we walked along the Savannah River, the water reflecting the sunset like molten gold, she stopped. I want to fix what they broke, she said, her voice fierce. Not just for you, but for others. I nodded, my throat tight. We will, sweetheart. We will. The idea for the Eleanor Grace Foundation began over pancakes in a diner off River Street. Emily scribbled the name on a napkin, her handwriting loopy, adorned with tiny stars. Mine was blocky, resolute, a reflection of the woman I was becoming. It's about dignity, I said, tapping the napkin. For mothers, grandmothers, widows, women erased by the people they loved most. Emily's eyes lit up. We'll give them a voice, a home, a chance. Her passion reminded me of George, his fire for justice, and I felt him in that moment, cheering us on. We started small. Emily took the lead, her sharp mind cutting through logistics like a knife. She registered the foundation, built a website, wrote copy that sang with purpose. She contacted senior advocates and legal advisors, her confidence startling for her age. A GoFundMe went viral, fueled by the podcast's reach. Women shared their stories, mothers abandoned, grandmothers discarded, and thousands donated, their messages a chorus, "This happened to my mom. Thank you for speaking." I read each one, my heart swelling and breaking. I wasn't alone, and neither were they. Our first program launched in Savannah, a free legal clinic, held weekly in a borrowed church basement. Maxine led it, her red lipstick a war banner as she explained rights to women with trembling hands. Ruth organized support groups, her humor a balm for raw wounds. Doy mailed resource packets to nursing homes, her careful handwriting a promise of hope. I spoke at the clinic's opening, my voice shaking but clear. You are not invisible, I said to the dozen women before me, their eyes mirroring my own pain. You are not done. They clapped, some crying, and I felt the spark in me flare into a flame. The media frenzy grew. Newsweek called, then CNN, NPR. They wanted my story, but I turned most down. I wasn't a spectacle, I was a woman who'd survived. But I agreed to a local Savannah station, drawn to the reporter, Lorraine, whose gentle questions carried her own scars. At the end, she asked, "What would you say to the people who put you in that nursing home?" I looked at the camera, my voice steady. I forgive you, but I'll never forget who I became because of you. The clip spread, a beacon for others, a warning to my children. Karen saw it. Her voicemail came after 6 months of silence, a brittle mix of anger and plea. I didn't listen. Luke tried to sue, claiming I'd stolen the house. Maxine dismantled his case in court, the judge dismissing it in minutes. David vanished, out of state, out of my life. Fine by me. But Emily, she became my shadow, my star. She traveled with me as we planned our first foundation home, a 5-bedroom house in upstate New York for women displaced by family abuse. We named it Grace House. The ribbon cutting was a blur of tears and hugs. Ruth held me as my knees buckled, the weight of it all, loss, betrayal, redemption, crashing over me. "You did it, Ellie," she whispered. I shook my head. "We did." That night, I sat on Grace House's porch, the air cool, the stars sharp. A breeze carried the scent of pine, and I closed my eyes, feeling George's hand in mine. We made it, I thought. The past was a scar, but the future was a fire, and I was ready to let it burn. The celestial dawn gleamed like a floating cathedral, its white hull cutting through Seattle's harbor under a sky streaked with cherry blossoms. The air was crisp, laced with salt and the faint sweetness of petals drifting like confetti. I stood on the upper deck, my hands gripping the rail, the wind tugging at my scarf. Ruth, Doy, and Maxine flanked me, their laughter mingling with the gulls' cries as the ship pulled away from shore. Emily was below, finalizing a grant proposal for the foundation, her laptop glowing in our shared cabin. This cruise to Alaska was our reward, a celebration of survival, a promise kept to ourselves. The water stretched endless, a deep sapphire that shimmered under the spring sun. I'd never seen anything so vast, so untouched. It made the ache in my chest, the one that still flared when I thought of Karen, Luke, David, feel smaller, less like a wound and more like a memory. "Can you believe we're doing this?" Doy asked, her floral scarf fluttering. "Should have done it 30 years ago," Ruth said, sipping champagne, her rhinestone earrings catching the light. Maxine pointed to the horizon. "Look at that sky. I want to paint it with a martini in my hand." We laughed, the sound carrying over the waves, a defiant hymn. That night, we dressed in our best for dinner in the ship's ballroom. The chandeliers cast a warm glow, the velvet chairs plush, the silverware gleaming with unnecessary weight. Halfway through dessert, molten chocolate cake with raspberry drizzle, the band struck up an Ella Fitzgerald tune, soft and wistful. Something stirred in me, a longing I hadn't felt in years. "I want to dance," I said, standing before I could second-guess myself. Ruth beamed, Doy clapped, Maxine raised an eyebrow. "Go get Ellie," she said. There was no partner, no one waiting across the room. Just me in a navy dress from Florence, shoes that pinched, and a heart too full to stay still. I stepped onto the floor, the band watching, passengers glancing up. I closed my eyes and swayed, slow and graceful, the music wrapping me like a memory. I danced for every night I'd cried alone, every holiday my children forgot, every woman in a sterile room wondering if her life was over. I danced for George, for Emily, for myself. Then, strong hands took mine. I opened my eyes to find Dennis, Ruth's new friend, smiling gently. He didn't speak, just guided me, steady and kind. Others joined, older couples, solo dancers, a small sea of strangers moving under the chandelier's light. We danced not as if we were young, but as if we'd finally remembered who we were. The music slowed, the final note lingered, and applause followed, warm and true. Back at the table, Emily stood, her eyes wet. "You looked like you were flying," she whispered, hugging me. "I was," I said, my voice thick. For the first time, I wasn't dancing for anyone else. Later, on our balcony, the sea stretched under a moonlit sky, the northern lights flickering green and violet. We watched in silence until Emily spoke, her voice soft. "Do you ever miss them?" I knew she meant my children. I took a breath, the air cool against my face. "I miss who I thought they were. I miss the hope, but not the pain." She rested her head on my shoulder. "I'm sorry they hurt you." I kissed her hair. "You didn't. And you're helping fix what they broke. That's more than I dreamed." We reached Juneau as the sun dipped behind icy peaks, casting golden light across the harbor. The air was sharp, our breath curling in the cold. While the others explored shops and sampled crab legs, Emily and I chose a helicopter tour, a reckless whim for two people afraid of heights. The pilot, Sam, had a gravelly voice and a calm that steadied us. We gripped each other's hands as the rotors spun, the world shrinking below. Juneau became a toy town, mountains looming vast and white, glaciers shimmering like ancient glass. Hovering over a massive glacier, the sun broke through, turning the ice holy. I'd never felt so small, yet so alive. "I'm glad you didn't give up," Emily said over the headset, her voice soft. Tears stung my eyes. "I almost did, you know. But then you called." She squeezed my hand. "I think you saved me too." We landed on a flat stretch of ice, wrapped in thermal blankets. The silence was profound, the snow hushing everything, pain, fear, memory. I pulled George's last letter from my pocket, the one I'd carried like a talisman. "Fight back, Ellie." I let it go, watching it flutter across the ice, weightless, until it vanished into the white. That night, back on the ship, we toasted with champagne. To Eleanor, Ruth said, glass raised. "The fiercest woman I know." To Grace, Doy added, "In every form." To second chances, Maxine said, winking. Emily clinked her glass to mine. To beginnings. We drank under the stars, laughter echoing across the deck. I closed my eyes, dreaming not of the past, but of mornings yet to come, not as a forgotten mother, but as Eleanor Grace Miller, reborn and free. The final morning of the cruise arrived wrapped in fog, the Alaskan coastline fading into a soft, gray haze. The celestial dawn rocked gently, its engines a low hum as I stood at the rail, coffee warming my hands. The air was damp, carrying the scent of salt and distant pine. I'd expected sadness at the journey's end, but instead, I felt full, brimming with a quiet strength I hadn't known I could claim. Emily joined me, her pajamas peeking from under a wool scarf. "Today feels different," she said, her breath clouding in the chill. "It is," I replied. "It's the last day of running." She frowned, confused. "Running from what?" I turned to her, the sea stretching endless behind. "From grief, from guilt, from everything I thought I failed to be." Her eyes softened, but she didn't argue. "You didn't fail, Grandma." "They did." I smiled, touching her cheek. "Maybe. But I don't want my life defined by what they did. I want it defined by what I chose to do anyway." After breakfast, we gathered in a private lounge, away from the ship's bustle. No stage, no speeches, just the five of us, Ruth, Doy, Maxine, Emily, and me. The room smelled of polished wood and fresh lilies, the windows framing a misty sea. We'd planned a small ceremony, Doy's idea, to honor the women we'd known who'd been lost to silence, discarded or forgotten. We sat in a circle, each holding a candle, the flames flickering like secrets. Ruth went first, her voice thick. "My sister, Clara. She stayed with a man who broke her spirit because she thought she had nowhere else to go." She lit her candle, the light catching the tears in her eyes. Doy read a poem she'd written the night before, her Vermont accent soft as snow. It spoke of roots and resilience, ending with, "For my mother, who never knew her own worth." Maxine, ever guarded, lit her candle for every woman I defended in court who didn't make it out. Her voice cracked, just once. Emily hesitated, then spoke. "For the version of my mom I'll never know, the one who could have been kind." Her flame trembled as she set it in the center. When my turn came, I took a breath, the weight of years pressing against my ribs. "For Eleanor Grace Miller," I said, "the one who stayed too quiet for too long." I lit my candle, letting the silence stretch, not from grief, but respect. That woman, the one who'd loved through pain, who'd endured when no one thanked her, deserved to be remembered. She'd kept going until she found the strength to stand. We set our candles afloat in a glass bowl, the flames dancing on the water's surface. I looked at these women, my saviors, my sisters, and at Emily, my legacy. "I'm going home," I said softly. Four heads turned. "Not Texas," I clarified. "I'm building something permanent. A headquarters for the foundation. A home for any woman who needs one." Maxine grinned. "Where?" I took a breath, the answer clear as the sea. Savannah. They nodded, as if it had always been the place. 6 months later, Grace Haven opened its doors. A white, 2-story house with green shutters and a wide porch that wrapped around like open arms, it stood on a quiet Savannah street, wisteria curling over the gate. The air was thick with jasmine, the lawn dotted with daisies. We'd built it with donations, love, and the stubborn will of women who refused to be erased. Emily became executive director, her fire guiding us. Ruth and Dennis hosted monthly supper clubs, their banter a magnet for laughter. Doy ran writing workshops, her poems stitching hearts back together. Maxine offered legal consultations every Friday, her red lipstick a beacon of defiance. I sat on the porch each morning, coffee in hand, watching women arrive, shoulders hunched, eyes guarded, suitcases light but hearts heavy. I'd take their hands, whispering, "You're not lost. You're just getting started." Each one was a mirror of the woman I'd been, standing in that beige nursing home, faith slipping through my fingers. Each one made me stronger. One evening, as the sun painted the sky peach and gold, Emily found me on the porch. "I want to write a book," she said, her eyes bright. "About you, about all of this." I laughed, the sound light. "You think people want to read about a grandma who sold her house and ran off to Italy with a pack of rebels?" She grinned, dead serious. "Yes. Because they're out there, women who feel stuck, who think it's too late. They need to know it's never too late." That night, I started jotting notes in a spiral notebook, memories, lessons, truths no one teaches until you've nearly lost yourself. I didn't know if it would be a book or a letter to the next generation, but I knew my voice wouldn't go quiet again. Grace Haven glowed behind me, its windows warm, its rooms filled with women learning to rise. The stars blinked above, and I felt George's presence, his words echoing, "You're stronger than me." I was. And with every woman who walked through our doors, I proved it, not just to him, but to myself. Thanksgiving at Grace Haven was a golden blur, the Savannah sun pouring through tall windows, turning the wood floors warm and syrupy. The air was heavy with cinnamon, roasted turkey, and cornbread fresh from the oven. Outside, red and orange leaves blanketed the lawn, crunching underfoot, while wind chimes on the porch sang softly in the breeze. Inside, laughter filled the dining room, not polite chuckles, but the deep, belly-born kind that comes from souls rekindled. The long table, donated by a woman once told she wasn't fit to host, groaned under mismatched plates, flickering candles, and bowls of food passed hand to hand. 22 women sat around it, some in pearls, others in jeans, all wearing hope like a second skin. Grace Haven had been open 3 months, yet it felt like a lifetime. Olivia was there, her voice steady after escaping a marriage that silenced her for 35 years. Harriet, left homeless when her son drained her savings, carved the sweet potatoes with a smile. Rosa, 71, who'd learned to read with Doy's help, left sticky notes around the house with words she loved, light, soft, beginning. I sat at the head, not by choice but because they insisted, their eyes saying I was the spark that lit this fire. But I knew the truth, they were the reason I was whole. I stood to give a toast, raising a glass of apple cider with a splash of bourbon, just how George liked it. The room stilled, forks pausing, eyes turning to me. "This year," I began, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat, "I didn't lose everything." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. I found everything I was missing. I looked at Ruth and Dennis, hands intertwined, at Maxine carving turkey like a courtroom queen, at Doy passing apple pie with a napkin for a tearful girl, at Emily standing behind me, my lighthouse. "I found myself," I said, my voice trembling now. "I found family, not by blood, but by choice. I found purpose in the ashes of pain. This isn't just a home for the broken. It's a home for the rising." Glasses clinked, soft weeping mixed with applause, a music made for us. Later, as candles burned low, I stepped onto the porch, the air cool, the stars sharp. Emily followed, nudging my shoulder. "You never told me what you wished for," she said. "That night in Alaska, when you let George's letter go, what was it?" I smiled, the memory vivid. I wished someone would know me for who I really was. And now, I wish someone else will see their own worth before it's too late. She leaned into me, her head on my shoulder. You're changing the world, Grandma. I kissed her hair. No, baby. We are. Winter came gently to Savannah, a soft hush of crisp mornings and pine-scented air. Grace Haven glowed with string lights, each room a story unfolding. Clara arrived with a suitcase and a faded photo of her late husband, her children having emptied her accounts. She was quiet at first, but in our garden, her hands found the earth, and her voice followed. Naomi, a former nurse forced into assisted living, taught morning yoga from a chair, guiding women to breathe through hearts still learning to trust. Every new face was a reflection of me that day in Oak Hills, suitcase by my feet, faith fraying. Every welcome I gave strengthened me. In January, we held our first night of names, Doy's idea. We stood in a circle, each holding a candle, honoring women lost to silence. Ruth spoke of her sister, Doy of her mother, Maxine of clients she couldn't save. I said, Eleanor Grace Miller, the one who stayed too quiet for too long. The silence that followed was sacred, a nod to the woman who'd loved through pain, who'd endured until she stood tall. Emily watched, tears on her cheeks, and later found me in the kitchen. I want to write a book, she said. About you, about all of this. I laughed. You think people want to read about a grandma who ran off with rebels? She nodded, fierce. They're out there, Grandma, women who think it's too late. They need to know it's not. I started writing that night, scribbling in a notebook, memories, truths, lessons learned when hope was scarce. It wasn't just for Emily's book, it was for me, a reclaiming of my voice. February brought news. The foundation was nominated for the Women of Strength Legacy Grant, honoring initiatives that restored dignity to older women. Maxine read the email aloud, Ruth screamed, Doy cried, Emily danced me around the coffee table. The local news filmed a segment, not just of me, but of all of us, Olivia, Harriet, Rosa, their stories a tapestry of power. Over 3,000 emails poured in, women asking for help, daughters seeking aid for their mothers. We were overwhelmed, then determined. New homes opened in Asheville and Michigan, another planned for Oregon. Each morning, I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, praying not for justice, but for joy. When a new woman arrived, eyes guarded, I'd take her hand and whisper, You're not lost. You're just getting started. Grace Haven wasn't just a house, it was a fire, and I was its keeper, passing the spark to every soul who walked through our doors. Spring arrived early in Savannah, as if the earth itself was impatient for renewal. Grace Haven burst with life, wisteria twined around the porch railings, daffodils erupted in the garden like tiny trumpets, their yellow petals catching the soft March light. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and blooming jasmine, a sweetness that felt like the world turning a page. I'd wake each morning to birdsong, the sound weaving through the open windows of my room, where I'd sit with a notebook, scribbling memories for Emily's book. The house hummed with quiet miracles, laughter from the kitchen, the scratch of pens in Doy's writing workshop, the steady rhythm of Maxine's voice guiding a woman through legal forms. Emily's book, not done yet, had taken shape, its pages a tapestry of my story and those of the women I'd met. It wasn't just a memoir, it was a declaration, a call to every woman who'd been told her time was up. We launched it with a garden party at Grace Haven, the lawn strung with fairy lights, tables laden with peach cobbler and iced tea. Over 100 guests came, women who'd passed through our doors, their families, even some children who'd once been the reason for their pain. Not all hearts harden forever, some soften with time, and that day, I saw it in the tearful hugs, the whispered apologies. Karen didn't come. Luke sent a bitter letter through a lawyer, claiming the book defamed him. We ignored it. David was gone, a ghost in some other state. But Emily's father and stepmother attended, bringing a bouquet of lilies. Thank you, her father said, voice low, for giving her back to us stronger. I nodded, my throat tight, seeing George in his eyes. That night, after the lights were dimmed and the dishes stacked, I sat on the porch, the same chair, the same mug, the stars above like old friends. Maxine joined me, a blanket over her lap. You did it, you know, she said. Rewrote the ending. No, I whispered, smiling. I just started telling the truth. She chuckled, her gravelly laugh a sound that had carried us through the darkest days. Ruth and Dennis waved from their cottage across the garden, their silhouettes soft in the moonlight. Doy was inside, typing a new poem about reclaiming your bloom. I closed my eyes, letting the memories come, not just the pain, but the love, George's hand in mine, the babies I'd rocked, the barefoot dances in our kitchen to Motown. I'd survived the silence, found the fight, and built a legacy with these battered hands. The award letter arrived on a morning thick with sunlight, flower dust glinting in the air. Emily and I were in the kitchen, laughing over Ruth's Scrabble mishap, her dentures flying mid-argument, when the mail came. A cream envelope, our names typed neatly, Eleanor G. Miller and Emily Grace Weston, Eleanor Grace Foundation. Emily opened it, her hands trembling halfway through. She passed it to me, wordless. I read, heart slowing, "Congratulations. You have been awarded the Women of Strength Legacy Grant for empowering women and restoring dignity to those too long forgotten. We honor you with a lifetime endowment." I sank into a chair, not for the money, though it would build 3 more Grace Havens, but for the words, "We honor you." No one had said that to me before. Emily knelt beside me, her face glowing. "You did this," she said. "You made this world." I shook my head. "We made it together." The celebration came the next weekend, a garden filled with over 100 women, some in wheelchairs, some with silver braids, all with stories etched in their eyes. They crowned me with a daisy and ivy wreath Ruth had woven, a silly thing I wore like a queen. Royalty, I realized, wasn't about ruling, it was about rising. That night, alone in my room, the award certificate sat beside George's framed letter and our wedding photo, young and bright-eyed. I spoke to him aloud, my voice cracking. "I did it, George. You were right, I was stronger than I knew." A soft knock interrupted. Emily peeked in. "Just saying good night." I patted the bed. "Come sit." She curled up, her head on my shoulder, like when she was small. "I'm proud of you," I said. "I'm proud of you," she whispered back. We sat in silence, the kind that holds everything sacred. At the window, I looked over the garden where so many had healed, where I'd healed. This wasn't a second chance, it was the life I'd always deserved. The moon glowed, spring thick in the air, and I smiled. I'd come home, not to a house, but to myself. The foundation grew, homes opening in new cities, each a beacon for the forgotten. And every woman who walked our path, eyes guarded, heard my whisper, "You're not lost. You're just getting started." They carried my spark, and I carried theirs, a fire that would never go out. Summer settled over Savannah like a warm embrace, the air thick with honeysuckle and the hum of cicadas. Grace Haven stood proud, its white walls and green shutters glowing under the Georgia sun, wisteria blooming wild across the porch. The garden was a riot of color, roses, marigolds, daisies, tended by hands that had once trembled with fear but now found purpose in the earth. Each morning, I'd sit on the porch with my coffee, notebook open, writing fragments of Not Done Yet. The words came easier now, not just my story, but the stories of women who'd walked through our doors, their voices weaving a tapestry of resilience. The Eleanor Grace Foundation had grown beyond my dreams. Homes in Asheville, Michigan, and Oregon thrived, each a sanctuary for women discarded by those they loved. Our Savannah headquarters, Grace Haven, was the heart, its rooms filled with laughter, tears, and the steady work of healing. Emily, now 17, ran the foundation with a fire that reminded me of George, fierce, unwavering, kind. She oversaw grants, trained volunteers, spoke at conferences with a poise that left me awestruck. Ruth and Dennis, settled in their cottage, hosted supper clubs that drew women from across the city, their stories mingling with the clink of wineglasses. Doy's poetry blog, with thousands of followers, ended each post with, "And still, Eleanor rises," a nod to me that made my heart swell. Maxine, our legal director, wore red lipstick like armor, dismantling cases of elder abuse in court with a precision that left opponents stunned. I'd become a quiet leader, less the face of the foundation than its keeper of sparks. I greeted each new woman, took her hand, and whispered, "You're just getting started." Their eyes, guarded, then hopeful, mirrored the woman I'd been in that beige nursing home, suitcase at my feet, faith slipping. Each one strengthened me, their courage a reminder of my own. One afternoon, a woman named Lila arrived, her silver hair braided tight, her hands clutching a worn Bible. Her son had sold her home, leaving her in a motel. She sat on the porch with me, silent at first, then said, "I thought God forgot me." I squeezed her hand. "He didn't. You're here." By week's end, she was teaching crochet in the common room, her laughter a hymn. The Women of Strength Legacy Grant had changed everything. The endowment funded new programs, counseling, job training, art therapy, and plans for 3 more homes by year's end. The media still called, but I let Emily and Maxine handle most interviews. I wasn't a symbol, I was a woman who'd survived, and my work was here, in the quiet moments of connection. Yet one request I couldn't refuse, a documentary filmmaker, inspired by Not Done Yet, wanted to capture Grace Haven's story. We filmed in the garden, women sharing their truths, Olivia's escape from silence, Harriet's reclaiming of her voice, Rosa's love for words. When my turn came, I spoke simply, "We're not here to fix the past. We're here to build a future where no woman is forgotten." The documentary aired to millions, sparking a flood of donations and emails, thousands of women, daughters, sons, all seeking or offering help. Emily hired more staff, and I marveled at her, this girl who'd once been my shadow, now a beacon. One evening, as we sorted mail on the porch, she handed me a letter, her eyes soft. "It's from Karen." I froze, the paper heavy in my hand. 6 months had passed since her last voicemail, ignored. I opened it, my heart steady. Her words were brief, a mix of apology and defense, ending with, "I didn't know how to stop it." I folded it, set it aside. She had years to say it, I told Emily. She nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. "You don't owe her anything." I didn't. The chapter was closed. One July afternoon, I visited my old house in Texas. Not to mourn or confront, but to see. Emily drove, the radio playing soft jazz, the air thick with summer heat. The house stood repainted, the porch redone, a baby swing out front. New owners, a young couple, had made it theirs. I stood across the street, unnoticed, a woman in sunglasses and a scarf. The rose bushes were gone, the shutters no longer sky blue, but I smiled. That house wasn't home anymore. Home was Grace Haven, the women who filled it, the fire I'd kindled. As we drove away, a breeze carried the scent of roses from somewhere nearby. I closed my eyes, feeling George's hand in mine. "We did it," I whispered. In that moment, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. My name is Eleanor Grace Miller, mother, grandmother, founder, fighter. My legacy isn't in buildings or money, but in the spark I passed on, the women who carry it forward. To every soul who's felt small, silenced, forgotten, I leave these words: you are not too old. You are not too late. You are not done yet. And neither am I.